So what's up, people, and welcome to the 4th episode discussion of Girls' Last Tour. So as I keep on watching this series, I become more and more impressed at the depth to which this series delves into, despite the plot being extremely shallow, if you want to say it that way, or short or simple, if you want to say it that way. It's nothing seriously bad or a criticism to the story writing, because it's not supposed to be a tremendous complex plot, right? I mean, this is not science fiction or mystery adventure or anything like that. This is a slice of life sort of story, although it is in a post-apocalyptic sort of situation. And yet, despite the simplicity of the story, there is a tremendous amount of depth to which you can analyze and interpret the story. And analysis and interpretation might be an appropriate thing to talk about here, because unlike the last episode, where the story revolved around the theme of tenacity and perseverance, in this one, the story revolves around faith, belief, analysis, and interpretation. And the way they did it was very interesting. A lot of times faith and belief is interpreted or shown in a first-person point of view, trying to show how your faith or your belief in things can bring about something in the story. That's how you see it in a lot of stories. But in this one, it's actually brought in from a third-person point of view, where these people, Chi and Yuu, experience something to which they don't have any past faith in. It's just something that they run into, and it's not part of their culture, their background, or anything. And from that perspective, how they actually see something that would be typically cultural symbolism of faith, I guess is the best way to say it. And what was interesting is, if you think about it in many ways, even in this world, when you think about it as faith, it's something that you take to the soul, right? It's something that you understand, that you believe in to the utmost, even if you can't explain everything with regards to why you believe in it. There are a lot of esoteric philosophies out there which you may not be able to always completely logically discuss, but the symbolism and the belief that has fallen behind that symbolism, is important enough for each individual of that faith to believe in it. And yet, if you don't believe, or if you're not involved in that specific situation of faith, then the typical person would not look at it through the heart or soul as the way they would look at things of faith, but they will look at it in terms of analysis and interpretation, something from the mind, something that's practical. So when you are in faith with something, you go outside of the practical and go into the esoteric, and you don't ask too many questions with regards to why you believe in it. That is the part of faith, right? You take a leap of faith in going that way. But when it's not related to your particular, area, then it's natural for you to look at things logically. And when you do, a lot of times, there's a lot of questions that come up with regards to what is the logic in terms of this. And it makes you understand why there may be conflicts and confusion that goes on in the various aspects of the world, because for something that's very faithful, to a certain group of people, it is just practically viewed to another. And the discontinued, or the, how do you say it, the disjointed feeling that you get between one group and another may come out to some of the confusion and the conflicts that you see. And so here, again, as far as the story is concerned, it's extremely simple. In the last episode, they noticed that there was a tremendous area of brightness once they got to the upper levels of the surface of the city. And they decided that they would actually go towards that bright light to see what was there. Well, in this episode, basically, they get to the bright light and find out what was there. And that's it. That's the entire story. 20 minutes of, we got there, and this is what it was. And so as far as plot is concerned, it's not a tremendously complex plot. But the amount of symbolism, the amount of imagery, the amount of philosophies that can come out all the way from the travels to that bright light to what they find in that bright light is quite intriguing, I guess. There's a lot of different thoughts that come out, and each one of these thoughts are very complex. I don't think I've understood all of the symbolisms that are going on. I probably missed quite a few of them, even though I've already found so many, and I'm not sure if I've understood them to the depth of which the writers wanted to say, but it is very interesting, and a lot of these I think are left as open questions. Okay, so as far as the practical side, Chi and Yuu received that camera from that gentleman in the previous episode, and so a lot of that time while they're getting to that bright light is taking pictures around them. And even something as simple as when Chi is standing in front of the camera, or not Chi but Yuu, Chi tells Yuu to say cheese while she takes the picture. And of course Yuu goes, why should I say that? And what the heck is cheese? Because she's never seen what cheese is. And she's not really sure why she has to say that when Chi is taking a picture. Of course, Chi says, well, that was the culture of the time, for people who were taking pictures, people who had the technology of the camera, they would say cheese at that time. And of course, that just completely confuses you and goes, what a weird thing to say. It becomes especially so when they find out that cheese is a food and it's kind of one of the flavors that their ration crackers are, and you finds out, hey, look at this. Today's flavor is cheese. And she's like staring at it going, now why should I scream out the flavor of this cracker when you're taking a picture of me? And so, all of that, representation of how strange culture can look to something that is very natural for people like us, and that turns out to be very, very interesting. And another thing that they see as they keep on going are these weird statues. They see more and more of them. And although Yuu, takes that, lighthearted, and she's giggling away at those statues, Chi, of course, is analyzing, wondering why they're there. For me, it was a little bit off-putting of having all these statues staring at you while you get towards that building. And of course, when they finally get to that building, what they find is that the building has a tremendous amount of those statues in a very dark, unlit building, which really kind of put me off. But what was interesting is as they kept on going, Chi starts wondering, I'm wondering if this is a building of worship, temple, right? Religious building. Of course, Yu goes temple of worship, and she goes yes to their god. And of course, Yu, and what we realize is religion doesn't exist in this era of the show. You, of course, naturally will ask, what the heck is God? and before Chi can even try to explain what that is, of course, you being you says, is it a food? And can I eat it? And of course, when Chi answers, no, it's not a food, you goes, so then what's so great about it? So yeah, this whole interaction makes one understand that when that sort of culture doesn't exist in that sort of era, the things that the culture for which that religion or belief existed to be important is questioned, and it's interpreted and analyzed from a practical manner. And like you said, if it isn't even food, why should I even value it? And to her, it would be very difficult to answer why in that era. Now, it keeps on going, and there's a lot of deep thought as you go in, as you can imagine when you're going into a temple of worship in a world where there is none, right? And somewhere along the way, for once, we see fear in Yu's eyes. And it's not what you may think. During that entire time, since there's no light in the building, they had to use the electric lantern that they had to light up the place. And that's why the whole place looks seriously spooky, walking through amongst those statues that stare down at you. But eventually, it gets to a point where the electric lantern goes out. And Yu is sitting there all by herself, not being able to see a darn thing because it's pitch black. And it's the first time she starts realizing, I wonder what would happen if Chi disappeared, if something happened to Chi. And it is the first time you actually see Yu in a non-playful sort of situation. Her expressions. She shows a tremendous amount of fear and a tremendous amount of hope that will never happen. And it is a very interesting thing. All of these things are happening all at once in a very simple plot where they drive up to the temple and then they walk inside. And so there's tremendous amounts of deep thought that goes on throughout this entire episode. And I found this episode probably to be the most interesting episode out of the 4 so far. Now, eventually the lights do come on, and it becomes the bright building that they see at night, when the automatic electricity comes on. And then it does turn out to be a temple of worship. And Chi does look at some of the writing on the wall, the scriptures, and she interprets some of it as saying that they're waiting for 3 gods. Now, I don't know what that means, and I presume that they'll clarify more of it in the future. But what's interesting is, as much as she said that it is a temple of worship, if you look at the symbols, it almost looks like it's also a building of science. And so it'll be interesting to see, how this goes. Was science one of the religions? Was the pursuit of knowledge considered to be sacred? What is this temple of worship? What are those statues? And what are these three gods that the scripture is saying they're waiting for? Now, of course, in Yu's mind, none of that, it goes in one ear and comes out the other, and she's just happy to have Chi back again. And of course, when they go inside, there's a lot of discussions about various things to which I won't go into here. If you really do want to delve into this, you really should see this episode, because I'm not doing this episode justice by explaining that there's a lot of symbolism and interpretation that goes on in this, and it may depend upon how you believe in certain things that you may interpret their conversations differently. But there was one notable point that I do want to talk about also, finally, in closing. And it is from Yu again. And she's, again, thinking practically, which is very unusual for Yu to think logically. And she mentions something which is very interesting with regards to this house of faith or religion, in which she says, if the people of that time had really no understanding of really practically what their faith was into, why would they even believe in that? Which was a very interesting question. If you were to explain what God is or what faith is, it would be a really hard thing to explain, because part of it is that it's something beyond what we can physically understand. So then her question of then, if you don't understand it, why would you put so much faith in it, was a very interesting question. And Chi answers her version, which is just her version. It's not a right or wrong. And it is based on probably their experiences that they had, and that they say, well, just like you, when you were stuck alone in the dark and you became very afraid, maybe the people of that era were really worried that if there wasn't anything beyond their world, they would be all alone. And maybe they didn't want that. And so they brought out the faith. And so I thought that was a very interesting interpretation. It's not considered to be correct or wrong. It's just Chi's interpretation of what she can figure out based upon the experiences that she has. But I did find that entire discussion to be very, very interesting. And although it goes into some very heavy philosophy, since this is Girls' Last Tour, which is a very calming and lighthearted series, they do it in a lighthearted manner. And again, it's good that Yu is there to lighten things up, because of the fact that themes like this can get very bogged down, and people like Yu bring in a little bit of the liveliness through that time. But it does come out again, coming back in terms of belief and faith and interpretation and analysis. In one side, because it's about belief and faith, they put their absolute following and understanding with regards to believing in that situation. But for people who aren't in that particular sort of culture or faith, they would think about it not from the heart, but from the mind. That's what people do. They analyze things that are not, to their own personal heart, right? When it's not something of your heart or soul, then you tend to want to analyze it with your mind. And when you do, you get a completely different view on what that faith appears to be. And that was something that was very interesting. So anyway, as you can imagine, I really enjoyed that episode, and I'll continue to watch Girls' Last Tour. So thank you very much for listening. I apologize if I offended anybody in my discussions. It was never meant to be. It was just an understanding of interpreting one view of a certain symbol or culture versus another, and how this episode represented that. Anyway, I'll continue on with more Girls Last Tour in the future. I hope you join me at that time. Thank you very much. And if you have any comments, please post it in the comment section below. And until the next episode, happy anime watching. And as always, Jaya, nice day, everyone.